Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sandeep, I see you've joined us. Thank you. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sandeep, I see you've joined us. Thank you. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sandeep, I see you've joined us. Thank you. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sandeep, I see you've joined us. Thank you. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Yes, you can hear the repetition of my introduction. Joining us. Sandeep, I see you've joined us. Thank you. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Yes, you can hear the repetition of my introduction. Okay, again, if you could take the slide back one, please, I'd appreciate it. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery is good. Yes, you can hear the repetition of my introduction. Okay, again, if you could take the slide back one, please, I'd appreciate it. Tim Alba joined us. Hey, Tim. Hope your hip surgery recovery. Jim Sterling, good to have you. Yes, you can hear. Okay, guys, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Okay, again, if you could take the slide back one, please, I'd appreciate it. Jim Sterling, good to have you. Yes, you can hear. Okay, guys, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Okay, again, if you could take the slide back one, please, I'd appreciate it. Jim Sterling, good to have you. Okay, guys, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Okay, again, if you could take the slide back one, please, I'd appreciate it. Yes, we're having a little audio difficulty. Jim Sterling, sorry about that. Good to have you. Okay, guys, we're going to get. Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. We certainly appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to join us live here at Leadership in the Age of Personalization live stream, whether you're joining us from Zoom or you're joining us via the live YouTube feed. I'm Glenn Yopes, and on behalf of GLLG, thanks again for joining us as we all, not just me, as we all interview Gustavo Canton. See, he's known as the analytics advocate, but he also serves as the Vice President of People Analytics for Schneider Electric, who will discuss the power of analytics. Now, as you experience Gustavo, you'll see how he thoroughly enjoys helping society evolve so that we can maximize human potential. Now, during our most recent live stream, I discussed America's identity crisis that has been shaped by the systemic limitations of standardization in corporate America and across other large institutions, and how we're all grappling with the tensions between the age of standardization and the age of personalization, where it's no longer about the business defining the individual, but rather how the individual now is defining the business. But how, as leaders, we must find that right balance between the two. Let me repeat that. We must find that right balance between the two, especially when you consider the impact and influence of millennials and Gen Zs, who not only represent future leaders, but they're the leaders of the cultural demographic shift that's reached its tipping point, especially when you consider not only the racial and social unrest in society today, but the strategic implications of COVID-19, both in the workplace and in the marketplace. COVID-19, social unrest, to unprecedented moments, both highly personal, disruptive events that we must acknowledge, analyze, and evolve. You see, the age of personalization is in full force. And this means that the role of data in analytics is also in full force, which means the luxury of time is over. I mean, leaders and organizations, we must be reinventing ourselves right now with greater strategic focus than ever before. And this can only happen by knowing how to collect the right data, knowing how to interpret the data by using the right tools so that those insights continue to evolve and so that we can properly identify the problems and opportunities that we should actually be solving for. You see, this lack of personalized analytics is a major factor as to why organizations have been so slow to empower employees, especially those on the front lines, to influence the business. See, this is why we've been so slow to evolve as organizations. Decisions at the top and middle of the organization have historically really hidden the ability of frontline employees and associates to influence in their own ways. And as one mentor used to tell me, leaders today must touch the business just as much as they lead it. So today's session is a Q&A session. It's not going to happen at the end. It's going to happen during the program. And we have GLLG staff that's standing on by waiting for those questions. But we're also going to have an open mic. So as you enter your questions in the Q&A module on the Zoom control panel, know that we're going to make sure that we handle this flow of questions as best as we can, because we want you to address them with an open mic, and Gustavo is ready to address those questions. And if you have any difficulties during the program, just log out and log back in. So let's have a look at our agenda for the day. Our agenda is going to really focus on why COVID-19 is accelerating our digital transformation, the importance of investing in the right tools, tech, and training, how AI is shaping the workforce of the future. We're going to look at the current environment that demands a different and faster way of working and why well-being should actually be your #1 KPI, and how analytics tools must be created to elevate individual capacity. We need to measure potential and contribution. Now, before we get started, I'd like to share with you a video of Gustavo at the Leadership in the Age of Personalization Summit in October. So let's have a look at that video, and then we'll get the program started.
We are not thinking machines that feel, rather we are feeling machines that think. That is actually my favorite quote because it gets to the root of personalization. And it was actually said by Antonio Damasio. Now, the interesting part of that quote is that it actually came from a new We are not thinking machines that feel, rather we are feeling machines that think. That is actually my favorite quote because it gets to the root of personalization. And it was actually said by Antonio Damasio. Now, the interesting part of that quote is that it actually came from a neuroscientist. And this neuroscientist did an experiment by understanding the brain. And to tell you a long story short, what they realized is that the machinery who actually takes care of decision making has emotions or needs emotions to be ingrained in it. So what is the implication of this? The implication is, in today's world, your organizations are trying to standardize and program you sometimes to do things in a way that is meant for a machine to do. And they are not allowing you to use your decision making as an individual to actually make the best decision or influence the outcome for your company. So I'm an analyst, and I obviously look at a lot of data. You know what is happening today? We are not looking at just the segments. We're actually looking at the individuals. So imagine that today, instead of saying, I want to have a model to predict turnover in North America, we're actually looking at a model to predict turnover for Anna. And we can actually say, based on how much time is Anna spending on iLearning, how much recognition is Anna getting from their managers and their network at work. the probability of Anna of staying in the company. A lot of organizations don't know how to measure the impact of well-being. Do you know, by any chance, from the top tech companies, on average, how much time is the tenure of an employee, for example, in Facebook? On average, a person will stay in Facebook 2 years. From the whole employee population. In Uber, is 1 year. And I'm talking about the top 10 companies in Silicon Valley. So the way you are looking at talent today is dramatically different to the way we are looking at talent in the past. And not only that, you are actually working today on policies or programs for HR that are taking you years to actually develop, design, and implement. By the time sometimes we develop and launch, this person already left the organization and went to the next company. So think about this. It's taking us longer to actually design the program for the talent than for the talent to stay in the organization, right? We've been talking today about metrics and dashboards and reports. And what did we learn today? We learned that it's not about the data sometimes, it's about the story. And I think we are missing the second part of the story, which is it's not only about retaining the talent, it's what is the value of that talent over time. We look at, for example, the typical retention, engagement, and all of those metrics. I will tell you, if you do the math and you actually keep your top talent, there is a very straightforward mathematical formula to understand what is the savings on keeping that employee. And I think a lot of you, when you think about analytics, you think about the data. But it's more about the storytelling, and it's also about the soft skills. And I will tell you, the number one skill that is required is not to have the best machine learning techniques or the best algorithms or the best analysts. The number one skill that you should have, and this is hard, is courage. Because all of you have an understanding of the big why. You are connecting the dots today. You see what is happening. The question is, are we having the courage to actually influence upwards and change the conversation? Because it's very easy to be fearful and be attached of the status quo. But if you and us don't work together to actually challenge the status quo, what's going to happen? We're going to continue staying irrelevant. And I want all of us to help each other to have the courage to disrupt the status quo. Thank you very much.
Well, Gustavo, we are delighted to have you today. So welcome. Boy, what a build-up to your introduction today, Gustavo. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me, guys. Super happy to be here. And first of all, I hope everybody, you and your families that are watching this are doing well. I know these are unprecedented times. So, the fact that we have health and that we are, helping each other in these times is the best thing that we can do. So happy to be here, Glenn.
Well, thank you so much, Gustavo. And just so Guillermo knows, I can't turn on my video. So if you can help me with that, I'd appreciate it. Gustavo, as you go back just a few months, and you gave that incredible keynote. Where is your head now with respect to people analytics than where it was back then? And how has this crisis changed what the role of data in analytics means to corporations? I can't even imagine just the decisions that need to be made at the speed that need to be made, given all the strategic implications and economic implications. Gustavo, what do you say about that?
If I say there has been a dramatic change in the way I think about the world today and how we operate today, that will be an understatement. The funny thing is that most corporations, including myself, we do all of our planning, let's say in December, right? And we have a plan to go and all the goals for January. But come March, the world changed completely, right? We have a pandemic, we have economic situations, then we are starting having a social unrest. This is something that is impossible to predict. With that being said, there are some corporations that are resilient and are ready and set up to take care of some of these things. But what I would say is that the way I look at my goals today, business continuity, well-being, health and safety, those are the things that are top of mind for me day in and day out, on top of my day-to-day responsibilities in people analytics, right?
Well, let's take a step back here, Gustavo. Define this term that I actually believe that you're one of the preeminent thought leaders on people analytics. Define that for us as we go through this story today.
Yeah, and this is the way I will define it, right? Let's take an example. A question that is very common in HR is, what is your headcount? How many people work in the organization? That's a very simple, common question that we answer day in and day out. But with COVID, for example, we have a different set of questions. The question of when should people go into a site to perform a job was taken for granted. How much people should be on that site working, and how do we take care of our customers and their well-being as well, is a different set of questions that we're asking today. And if you pay attention, all those questions have something in common. It's about the workforce and the customers. It's about people. So the way I define people analytics is we are taking information that impacts human behavior, either for our workforce or our customers. And you can look at it from any lens. You can look at it from the safety lens, the well-being lens, the diversity and inclusion lens. There are many lenses. I would say, the flood sometimes in organization, and is that we have to sometimes place the function under, let's say, HR or IT or strategy, when in reality, we are looking at an end-to-end problem, right? We are connecting your workforce and your talent to your customers. Right?
Well, let's discuss that. Let's jump right in. One thing that not just COVID-19, but all this social unrest is teaching us is that we are becoming much more interconnected and interdependent on each other. Now, when you look at the traditional standardized enterprise, you have silos everywhere. Departments aren't talking to each other enough. So I've got to imagine that given this need for interconnected and interdependence, that needs to translate across the enterprise, especially if we're going to capture the right data, but also for the enterprise leaders to be able to interpret the data so that we're making decisions in real time. Unlike in the past where we looked at the data, sometimes we didn't even believe the data and we were solving for the wrong thing. So how's that changing now?
This is super interesting, right? I have worked in many companies in different countries for different industries. And every time something like this, not exactly like a pandemic, but something major happens, you know what I learned? All these barriers, when people really want to focus, they go away, right? So I have a quote that I like a lot. It's called "Wisdom comes through the wound," right? And basically, this has been a very, very painful time for everybody in society, including us in Schneider Electric. There has been a lot of effort that the organization have been made to try to safeguard our employees, take care of our customers, even with reduction of hours, whatever we need to do to take care of people. I'm very proud of what we have done. And I hope that we don't forget the wisdom, right? We don't have to wait for the pain for us to keep working in this manner. And so, I think that there are some topics that I have seen talk for years that didn't get resolved. Now they got resolved because people had to get it done, right? So, people got together, they pulled together, and they pushed forward.
So are you saying you're seeing an elimination of silos?
I am seeing good examples of elimination of silos, and also I've seen examples of paradigm shifts. A very simple example is in our company, for example, let's say less than 10% of the people work remotely. Most of them work in the office, like most organizations. With this happening, about 70% plus of people are actually working remotely, or we're working remotely. A lot of people are coming back to try to normalize to be on site, but that's a very slow process to go back in, right? Yeah. But my point being is that, I don't know if this happened to you, Glenn, but how many people do you know that didn't allow their teams to work remotely because they thought, they're not going to be as productive, or maybe they might not be. If I don't have them in the office, I don't know if they're going to be working. I mean, this might seem like a little thing, but I have seen companies and peers of mine working for decades with this mentality. And these kind of instances force us to see what can really happen. And I'll tell you the example of my team. We have people in like Australia, Europe, Asia, the US, all over the world. I don't get to see them on a regular basis. We are used to work in this remote mindset, but like I said, a lot of things have to adjust and learn how to work in this mindset. And that by itself, it was a little of a learning curve.
So I think this is a good time to share our first polling question with you all. Here it is. I'm going to give you just 30 seconds to answer this. Who led the digital transformation of your company? CEO, CTO, or COVID-19?
So far, it's pretty one-sided.
Yeah, so far it's pretty one-sided, and for some reason it stopped, and I'll share the results. 100% of you, if any of you have a different opinion, let us know. But why is it that it takes a major crisis to get us to act on something that we knew we had to act well before the crisis?
I guess, well, I would say we have been programmed to act and work and collaborate in a certain way. So again, even in organizations that have people that are very collaborative, and I would say I am happy to say that I'm in an organization that is very collaborative. Even when something like this happens, there is a lot of learning that needs to happen. Where is the data? Who do you contact? How do you make sure things get into place? So there is always time to learn, but we have been programmed by the function, as I mentioned before, sometimes to not share all the data because there are issues with privacy or concerns about who sees what, right? And so I guess one of my main messages here is we definitely need to find a way to democratize the data. We need to stop compartmentalizing the data for different things, because in the end, we are all working for the organization to provide insights to take care of the workforce and the customer, right?
Yeah. Well, on that note, look, we've got people paying close attention. We want your questions. Please submit them. And again, we'll get you on a live mic. And I mean, you came here for a reason, and we want to make sure that Gustavo answers your questions. And just to let you know, when he signed on to do this, he said, "I'm not here to lecture, I'm here to learn." So he really wants to be active in addressing your thoughts and questions. And, some of you, I don't know all of you on the call, but I see that Walter Fawcett's here. Walt, do you have a quick question? I'm going to actually let you talk right now because I know you're thinking of something.
Well, I'm always thinking stuff, right? Hey, Gustavo.
Hey, Walter.
One of the things that that I am interested in is just on some techniques that might be used to measure things like engagement or productivity by using some of the data that exists today in organizations, and how accurate is that? So, like, one of the things that most companies, their database of emails, both in and out of the company, have lots of interesting information in there, and they can be used to identify relationships, can be used to identify level of influence, sentiment. Same thing potentially with audio on phone calls. And I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing today.
Definitely. And I will tell you, let's start with the basic part about the data platform, right? You need to have some kind of strategy with your data in the first place. And to your point, there are many different ways to get data. There is email data, which you can do sentiment analysis. There is biometrics data, which you can actually see interactions between human beings. There is also data in terms of from vendors or external data about, like, LinkedIn data, for example, or job board data, to understand how people are connected within the organization. All this data exists, plus all the typical internal data you might have. But my point is one thing to have the data and another thing to have clean data so that you can access and do the analysis. So that's why it's very important for you to have an infrastructure that helps you and enables that. In our case, we call it like a sandbox of data. We try to have different data sources from different systems and try to blend it together. And most organizations struggle with this because obviously it's a huge undertaking. It requires technology. But one thing that Glenn and I have been discussing in the past is this kind of situation is not saying for us to put things on hold. It's actually giving us the opposite message. The message is it's time to accelerate where we're going. So I'll give you the example what we're doing in Schneider Electric. We actually are working to have something called the Intel DS, which is a data lake. Many companies call it data swamp. I mean, there are many ways and you can blend the data, right? And then to your point, then you can have all this access to all this data in one place from different sources, from different uses. And then from there, you're gonna have your analytics tools on top of it. A lot of people use things like, Alteryx, Python, R to do statistics. You might have a good BI. And by the way, if you see the industry, I think there was a report from Harvard Business Review that talks about the use of data by BI is actually increasing during COVID. So there is a huge need for reporting. On the flip side, most organizations are stuck on the reporting. About 80% of companies are stuck in actually just the reporting part. And we are not here to do just reporting. We want to be able to anticipate and help provide prescriptions to decisions. So going back to your point, I think it's great to have all this data, but we need to have the right infrastructure in place to secure the data and be able to use it to do analytics. And then on top of that, we're actually right now deploying a pilot with AI because it's not only to have the data and to have it in one place, it's to have the right tool for people to empower the frontline users.
So on that note, can you just take a step back, Gustavo, because there's a significant difference between reporting and descriptive analytics versus diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Can you kind of break that down for the audience, but also help them understand what side of the ledger have we been and where do we need to be?
Yeah, so I mean, again, based on my experience and what I've seen with many corporations, especially on the, well, let's start, because I started my career in marketing, I've done strategy, I've been in the business continuity analytics, and now, most recently, I would say since 2012, I've been in the HR people analytics space, right? So it depends on the function of the organization, the stage there are. Obviously, marketing started way ahead than HR, so they have a different level of maturity, and perhaps they were doing much more, diagnostics, insights, predictions, and prescriptions. HR, most organizations, let's say 80% of organizations are still in the kind of reporting, beginning of diagnose, doing some advanced analytics here and there, but not a lot of predictive capabilities and so on. I mean, this is a very long journey. And for us itself has been a transformation, right? When I joined the organization, it was a lot of, basically reports in Excel or things here and there in Tableau. But little by little, we have been increasing the maturity level. And one of our approaches was to start doing use cases. Because if you do a use case and get the data, which is the most high-level part, then you can show what is the value of doing more predictive analysis. People hear about these terms over and over again. I think everybody gets that analytics is important. They don't understand that it's one thing for me to tell you, Glenn, there is 70% of people working remotely, but that's just a report. It's information, right? That doesn't prescribe you. What I want to do is I want to say, hey, Glenn, and by the way, we predict that in the next 6 months, this is how much people are going to be working per day in the facilities, because now we have to track usage of the site by day and see what are the maximums allowed, right, based on different guidelines.
Yep.
And then after that, the next step is to prescribe, okay, based on this, you might want to prescribe, hey, on these facilities, we're going to have to limit people to stay at home and don't come to the office because we are always hitting the maximum allowed by the government or the entity on the company. And not only that, we might have to rethink if the real estate that you have in the first place makes sense or not. I mean, yeah. we have sites in very, cosmopolitan areas like, Hong Kong, Beijing, UK. Those are some of the most expensive real estate in the world. And as you can imagine, cost of occupancy is super high. So, those are the kind of stuff that we are trying to get to in the more prescriptive space. Does that answer the question?
It answers the question. And if anyone wants Gustavo to talk about that offline, just let us know. We'll make sure to put you in contact with him. He's been kind enough to allow for that. But Gustavo, give us a sense. We talk a lot more and more these days about the rise of people analytics in the United States. But how is people analytics being adopted and or accepted or not in global markets?
Yeah, I would say for the last 4 years, I have seen a dramatic increase in the appetite for people analytics functions. I mean, as you know, I was living in Europe for the last 2 years. So I saw firsthand how organizations are starting to get more and more into this trend, assigning resources, investing in technology. In Asia, it's also catching up. There is a lot of talent and a lot of things that are happening with people analytics. And interestingly enough, depending on where you are in the world and how privacy laws apply to you, mm-hmm. you might have some places where it's easier to actually mature in people analytics than others. Like, I'll give you an example. As you know, privacy laws perhaps are a little more stringent in Europe in terms of individual data, usage of data, what is allowed to be used, that perhaps in China or other countries. So it's not only that where it's growing, but how fast it's growing based on the environment that is allowed in those countries or cities or areas, right?
So Gustavo, one thing that we talked about offline before we started today was that you actually believe, as part of this data lake or data swamp, and how it's not just about measuring functions and traditional KPIs, but where data is really going, it's all about optimizing people. And you had a perspective that this function just shouldn't reside in IT or marketing or HR, but under corporate strategy. Help us understand that thinking.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's very obvious that, at least to me, that organizations who already have a centralized function or a very clear governance on how analytics is managed have an advantage in terms of speed. I'll give you an example, right? So I've been in organizations prior to this that when things were happening or disruption was happening in the US, the company was able to react faster than the government to actually mitigate a disaster. I think that's fantastic. I think all organizations, most companies, as part of our social responsibilities, should aspire to this. That's what we're trying to get to. And for us to get that speed, like I mentioned, the typical prioritization of resources from corporations and the typical structure of the organization, if you have a diverse analytics workforce within the company, it might be hard for you to navigate all that and get you to the end result that you're trying to get to. So in my opinion, what I'm saying might sound a little bit controversial or provocative.
Okay, we're here to be that way. It's
but I guess it's time for people analytics to not be seen as a function that is a vertical function. I think it's just part of the corporate strategy, and it should be directly attached to it. And all these, teams from real estate, facilities, finance, marketing, and so on, should be able to provide the data. And that way, when people ask the question, why you're blending the data, you can answer, well, because it's part of the corporate strategy, and we need to blend the data to provide all this information in one place. I mean, you see what I'm saying? This sounds super intuitive, but because we build organizations in a specific way, we don't really have the aha moment until this use case of COVID happened, right?
Yeah, well, and it will multiply as social unrest that we're experiencing in society creates another wave in the workplace, and the need for this kind of data that's missing in many corporations becomes mandatory. We've got someone that's watching right now, and her name is Michelle Wynn. Michelle, how are you doing? Let me make sure that I give you the opportunity to talk. You have talking privileges now. Michelle is the CFO of Financial Services over at CVS. And Michelle, how you doing?
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Glenn. How are you?
Good, good. If you could raise the volume, it's okay if we hear the dog back there. I had my puppy in here just a minute ago. Prior to your current role, you played an instrumental part in the creation of what you call the personalization engine. These engines to increase patient adherence to their medications and therapies. Can you kind of give us a sense of what was involved in building that engine as you hear the things that Gustavo's talking about?
Hi, Gustavo. By the way,
Hey, Michelle.
Good to see you again. So as you're aware, we chatted at the summit back in October how passionate I am about analytics. I was in the analytics space for nearly 10 years before I decided to move back into finance, where I came from. But specifically, the people analytics space is fascinating to me, and it's great to see that companies like Schneider Electric is way ahead of the curve on that, because I think many companies are still kind of behind when it comes to people side of analytics, as we're still continue to focus more on the customer side. But people or colleagues are what make the customer happy, right? So if you don't have happy colleagues, you're not going to have happy customer. So in terms of what we've done in the analytics space on the customer side, that we call, there are a few different terms: personalization engines, next best action. I'm sure many of you have heard that term. But so when we started out the journey about 3-4 years ago, and actually when I heard of the term data swamp, I was brought back some frightening memories. But when we started out the journey 3-4 years ago, we actually referred to it as data swamp, because we didn't have a data lake at that point. Because for us, data swamp is considered very what we call dirty data, right?
Yeah.
So we started building out. So that was the first journey, is how do we wrangle the data, engineering the data set, making sure that we have clean data, building out that data lake before we can start the personalization journey of our patient adherence effort. And so we started to, I think it took us a good year plus to start it out on the data journey before we can even think about bringing in the data scientists to build these massive models that focus on the individual level of the patient. As you mentioned earlier, things used to be segment, right? Everything was in segmentation, where we group people together that are alike, and then we target them in a big group. But since we started out the personalization engine, and I think we'll have more time to talk more about this in detail in the future, if things work out. But that effort has really, I think, transitioned CVS into, from focusing on a segment of customers to really understanding each patient at an individual level. And from that effort, we're able to see huge adherence. So we have what we call the patient adherence index that we measure compared to our peers. And it's really great to see that our adherence index is the highest among all of our peers. And as a result, obviously, our script volume and customer count has increased as a result. So my question for you, Gustavo, would be great to hear more about. I know you've been in this journey of people analytics for a few years now. Would be good to hear how that has, the success metric that you're measuring your effort, and how that has been going at your company.
Definitely. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think, listening to you're talking about healthcare and the impact that you're having on your customers. Now where everybody's learning about healthcare, you want it or not, like everybody, I'm seeing the news and I'm looking at, how to wash my hands. What's the correct way to go into a place, using face masks or not, So now we are learning more and more about your business, which for decades. So there is a huge learning curve for me. The other part is that this is a journey that is a very challenging journey. And I see some of the chat comments, and I see the word frustration, challenge, and so on. Let me tell you, this is not an easy journey. It's not an easy transformation. When we started, like I said, there were, we have our database, but there was a lot of work to be done in the data. You call yours a data swamp. Probably mine was a data swamp too, because there was a lot of data that needed to be cleaned up. But over the years, we are getting better and better, right? So the key here is that you need to stick on it. You need to show use cases, show the value. To me, the way I show value, and this might sound very interesting, most analytics teams look at how much insights they produce or how much value they bring to the business, or they might look at how good the visualizations are or the storytelling. There are many ways to measure success. The way I measure success personally for my organization is, how do we free up your energy? That's actually a hashtag that we have in Schneider Electric, because there is so much things that we can make so much efficient. And you know, Glenn, I have a passion for humans trying to replicate the work of machines. We will never win. Trust me, you will not be able to beat the AI algorithm that we're using. Like I mentioned before, just to give an example, we have this tool, we call it the PIP. It's powered by ThoughtSpot, which is a very renowned vendor. It's a leader on the Magic Quadrant from Gartner. We can actually run through the AI hundreds of 50 million rows in less than 3 seconds and get an answer to what are all the outliers. Where do you see discrepancies on the data? You know, it is impossible for a human being to try to compete with that. Trust me, I started as an analyst doing SQL work, doing the analysis. I'm a hands-on individual who did all this growing up. And as I move up in my career, I keep looking at the technology and I'm thinking, I should not focus on the analytics in terms of the technical skill set. I should just focus on being a better consultant, be more empathetic, be a better communicator, be a better influencer. I still love to play with analytics tools and I still love to do it. That's why I got here in the first place. But, you know, make no mistake about it, we are in a different generation. And for next year, 2021, a lot of these pre-built reports, technologies that you might have today, maybe like 70% of that stuff is going to become irrelevant, because AI, augmented reality, augmented analytics, that's what's going to take over.
Thank you, Gustavo. I'd like for you, and by the way, thank you again, Michelle Wynn. And Michelle's actually going to join us on a live stream sometime in August or September. So thank you for that, Michelle. So we've got a question here again from Walter. He says, where does people analytics cross the line of an intrusion of privacy? If in the process of trying to optimize well-being, you identify an employee that is not well, sick, having issues with personal relationships, etc., how do you govern what can be done with the data, and by whom? Does your manager call you in to recommend a marriage counselor? Do you start serving personalized ads on your internet? What are your thoughts there, Gustavo? And thank you, Walter.
Let me summarize this in one sentence. Just know what you're doing and don't get in trouble, right? So that sounds very simple, but this takes a lot of years of experience to know how to use data. And I will tell you something, be very open. I hear a lot of videos about, you know, the privacy intrusions in the future without privacy, and how all these technologies can be so intrusive. I have been in this space for 15 years. And every time I want to do something, I come up with an idea. I try to create a proof of concept with that idea, even without the data, right? And there are guidelines that we need to follow. And this varies by country, it varies by company, by industry. It depends on the actual product that you're developing, right? So to give you an example, one time, this is a previous organization, I was trying to start a community for employees to give their voice and their opinion directly, because we wanted to make decisions in 2 days as opposed to 2 months. Very simple use case, very clear, this solved for, right? And it's a good intent from the organization. Even though we have a good intent, that doesn't mean that it might be well seen by privacy or legal. So I have to sit down with 6 lawyers from 6 different legal teams in the organization to actually go through all these scenarios, understand why am I trying to do it, the intention, how it's going to be perceived, and so on. So I have gone through a lot of different scenarios and things that you do. In the end, I always have the best intention for my employees. I don't do anything. Anything that I do in analytics is with intent to not help an employee. I always do it either to help with their development, help with their well-being, try to keep their safety. that's always the good intention. But somebody in privacy have a different lens, and they might tell you, hey, Gustavo, why you're looking at turnover of these individuals? Is that a good thing? How is this helping the individual? So this might seem like very basic questions to somebody like you who has been in this space for many years, Michelle, or others, but these are relevant questions that we need to look at. And like I said, depending on the country, in some cases, it might be very easy for me to do a turnover model and deploy it and implement it in that country. And in some other countries, they might say, no, Gustavo, because this might give the perception that you're actually predicting who's going to leave, and we might be letting this person go for some other reason that just the analytics that you're showing or the attributes that you're looking to predict the turnover. So it's a very long answer to your question, but basically it comes with a lot of experience. Make sure you always talk to your legal teams, privacy teams, all your expert security, right? And have a good network that support you, and make sure the business is willing to take the risk. Because again, in the end, the business is the one who's going to say, hey guys, we need to go and do this. And in some cases, whatever you do has implications.
Talk quick.
Sorry, somebody has a question?
It's okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, whatever you do, sometimes what you do might have implications, and you might actually appear on the Sunday news, for an initiative that you wanted to roll out. And actually, that has happened to me. I have done projects that actually went all the way to the news. But, you need to understand the risk, and you need to know what are you doing, and the leadership needs to understand why they want to take the risk for the business, because there is a reason of why we're doing it in the first place, right? As long as you are clear on that, I think you're going to be okay.
And Michelle thinks that a short answer is the company legal department would need to sign off on what can be done depending on the country or even state laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I mean, this vary by state. This can vary by country, but it can vary by company. It can vary by industry. There are many factors that goes into this.
So we're fully engaged. We're thinking, we're navigating Gustavo's comments. We're waiting for your questions. Please submit your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to do another polling question just to give you some perspective of what the value of data and analytics are. So here's our next polling question. Okay, we're going to end this one. And then we're going to go here. Oops. Guillermo, can you help me with the polling question? No. Oh, forgive me. I got it. Okay, here it is. And I've just launched the polling question. What is the annual revenue growth of firms citing data and analytics in their earnings calls between 2014 and 2017? Let's get a few more. I'll give you another 20 seconds, please. Thank you. And Gustavo, do you see the data?
Mm-hmm. I see it.
Okay, great.
And I think it's on point, right? As we can see, and it's okay for me to share,
Yeah, sure. Right? Make some commentary.
Yeah, okay. Great. So first of all, this data, thank you to Cindy Hosen. She's the CDO from TopSpot. She actually showed me this slide, and it's basically from Gartner. That's the source of this information. But basically, if you are using data and talking about it externally, you see that companies who do so actually show a 13% positive growth in annual revenue. On the contrary, companies who do not mention them see a negative 2%. And as most of you guess, that's the case, right? There is a correlation between how much you use analytics and how ingrained it is in the culture and how much people talk about it. With the industry or the market, and how your company is performing as well. So that speaks to the power of data.
Now, Naveen, I know that you've been very active on the chat, and we greatly appreciate it. I just thought, one thing that grabbed my thoughts as you've been chatting, and again, feel free if you like to use the open mic, we'd really welcome you. Gustavo, this is all very exciting and exhilarating, and I think everybody on this call recognizes the need to advance data and analytics across the enterprise. But with respect to those companies that are just slow to move. I mean, I've seen across many industries where we're still using a very basic dashboard that is just providing us the basic data. And even that data isn't accurate. I mean, how do we get someone, let's say, if the baseline is 0 and it goes to 10, how do we get them to at least 1? Because it seems to me that there's a lot of people at -5. I mean, I think just because you have data systems, if it's inaccurate data, you're in the negative.
Yes. And I will add to that companies understand that frontline workers needs to be empowered. If you ask them, they will say like I think it's 87% of frontline workers need to be empowered. And what they say is that they need better technology. So here is something that I always say. Why, when I'm at home, I have the best technology. I have this super good, fast phone. I have this watch that does some marvelous stuff for me. I can control my sound system. I can control everything. But when I go to the office, suddenly, I have to kind of change my patient level to adapt to the office technology, right? That's a huge issue. And about 86%, like I said, of people or workers say that they need to be better enabled with technology for them to make decisions, right? And so if you start with that end in mind and you understand this, going back to the point again, you start your journey in terms of what's the talent that you hired in the first place. Again, because people is the number one thing that is going to drive this. It's not going to be a machine. It's not going to do all this by itself, right? And by the way, when I talk about people analytics, it's not me who just drives all of this. Our CHRO has to have a vision, right? There are teams in IT, we call it Schneider Digital, that support us. They have to be on board with us for doing this. The HR community needs to be on board. All these other areas, all these people and all this talent is what allows us to get out of it. Because guess what? A lot of the data that goes into the system, there is a person manually inputting the data sometimes. It can be an HRBP, it can be a manager, it can be somebody in HR services inputting the data in the system. So for me to give you that report, that basic report that at 1, I need to make sure that all these stakeholders believe that they will get a value from this report.
Just to get at level 1?
Well, that's the first step, right? For them to say, hey, we have a system, all of you have a role to play. That's a change management component that needs to be in place for them to see the value of, inputting data in a timely manner, making sure they take the time to use the right keys to input the data. There is a lot of things that are very basic. So leadership.
So Gustavo, you're making me think as people analytics has been in HR. I mean, HR is one of those cost centers that's way behind with technology. And now you're asking them to be change agents? This is impossible.
Well, I don't think it's impossible. If it were impossible, I would not be here trying to do what I'm doing.
No,
right?
I guess we need the right talent to get us there. But
exactly.
So what's the function of the first thing I want to get to, because now you got me fired up, is what do you advise an organization that's struggling with analytics? How do we get them out of the negative and into the positive? As I mentioned to you, it's negative if they may have a dashboard, but the data is inaccurate. How do we get them to at least a baseline where they're able to manage the data and the data is actually helping them make some basic decisions that they can count on?
To tell you the truth, the answer to me is leadership and courage, right? And what I say leadership is because you need to have a CHRO, if it's in HR, who is willing to say, we know this is important, we know we need to do it, it's a transformation, and we need to invest on it. And then hire the right talent in the different areas, not only in people analytics, all the different areas that surround the function, and say, okay, you guys, you tell us what you need. Going back to your earlier point about the individual defining the business, especially in this function, which is very hard to transform sometimes, it might be an advantage to bring somebody who has the maturity and has seen already how to do it. Because remember, I started in HR doing some work in 2007. That's 13 years ago. It's a long time. And officially in 2012. So imagine the learning curve that we had for us to be able to grow the way we grew. It took time for us to get there, right? But the issue is that, as I'm showing you, and you have shared with this poll in the statistics, this is the issue now. We don't have the time that we used to have in 2013 to make those transformations. right? So it's in the best interest of the organization to understand, hey, this is not HR anymore. They are taking care of people. They are taking care of the customer, and the workforce needs to be enabled. So the way we prioritize, we're not going to prioritize based on sales, and then finance, and then compliance, and then HR. No, we have to say, what are the questions that the organization needs to be able to answer quickly, and what data our leaders need to be able to make decisions and develop our talent in the way they need to be developed. You know, it's a different way of thinking, and it requires courage to get to that.
Well, I'm bringing this up because it's all about change management right now. And, doing the types of things that you've discussed, which it gives me so much optimism and hope of how we could evolve faster. It really requires the right people that understands how to manage change and recognize that they just can't hire a vendor, implement, and say, voila, we have data analytics. Doesn't work that way. And I've seen that happen too many times. I mean, no one knows your business better than the ones that are touching it and leading it. And I think that these are some of the myths that just because we hire someone from the outside, they can not only integrate, but deploy, and everything is fine and dandy. I mean, what are some of the traps when people make those moves, Gustavo?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, like I said before, let's say take 100 companies, maybe 10 companies are able to reach the maturity level on the function because they are able to make the investment, the transition, the journey, the change management. To your point, this is exactly it. Culture, which people sometimes don't talk enough, culture is one of the biggest components that leads to the success of the organization. And for analytics, it's the same thing, right? So if you're talking about roadblocks that I have seen, yes. I'll give you one. I give you a very simple roadblock that I observe. I see two types of leaders. There is the leaders who look at a dashboard or a visualization, and they will say, this is directionally correct. You're 70% there. Let's keep iterating. Let's keep going. And what can I do to support you to get it to 100%? And there is leader B, which is the data is only 80% accurate. This doesn't work. You know, something is wrong. Go back. This is not working. You know, you can have the same talent, but the leader is the one who's going to help you enable some of this change management, and they need to help propel you so you can say, hey, let's go together and make the case so we can go and talk about, hey, what is needed for you to be able to get this from 80% to 100%. But for now, we are directionally okay with 80% of the information. I will be able to make a decision. You know,
Yeah.
that is a different way of looking at information and making decisions with information.
Well, this brings us back to those that are stuck in the age of standardization and those that are willing to honor today's age of personalization that is driving their business today. So we got another question here. And Walt, thanks again for your contributions. The inevitable outcome of technology advancements and the speed of analytical insights is happening at an increasing rate and of change of how the workplace operates. What are some techniques to prepare the employees in the workplace to adapt to the change?
I think you have to have a culture of learning. I think number one, that's very important. I mean, just today, I was sponsoring a session with the learning team in partnership with other areas like talent and so on, to talk to our audience about data literacy and why data is important and why you need to tell stories, right? So a lot of what we do, you know, if you look at my job, change management, learning session, education in general, not only with the teams, with the leaders, and reverse mentoring as well. Like you mentioned in the beginning, part of the reason I'm here is because I'm not here to just preach or say what I know. I'm here because I pay attention to what people are saying in the chat. Yeah. Pay attention to what Michelle and others, you know, are telling me, because there are many things that you might be doing today in a different industry or a different function that I could learn from, and I need to be able to adapt to that. So I think openness and fluidity in the way you learn also is super important for you to get through that change management.
So Gustavo, we're at the top of the hour. We want to be respectful of people's time, but if Jim Sterling, are you there? Do you mind if I unmute you? you just said that don't let perfection get in the way of great. I've unmuted you. Did you want to say a few words? He's not letting me unmute him. So that means he's must be multitasking. But Jim, if you ever want to get on, please do so. How about you, Tim Alba? I know that
I think he can. I think he unmuted. Jim, can you speak? Oh, sorry, he went back to mute.
Tim, I'm allowing you to talk now. I've just unmuted you. So, Tim?
Yes. Hi. How are you today?
How are you, Tim? By the way,
I'm doing great.
Thank you for being courageous enough to join us. Any thoughts on what Gustavo's talking about? I mean, you're in the healthcare industry where the importance of digital transformation is at an all-time high. Any thoughts or questions?
Well, I mean, just a couple thoughts. One, the first one around change. I think one of the important organizational analytics metrics to follow is the pace of change within an organization. In other words, those frontline workers or those frontline leaders, thinking of, say, managers, supervisors, directors, at what pace are they driving change themselves? And what's the structure available for them to create change? I like, Gustavo, what you said about, you talked about reverse mentorship, but there's also coaching. There's enabling structures that allow those frontline individuals to establish change plans and pursue those. Often simply what they need is to know what the data is. They know how to respond, but they're sometimes so close to the work, they can't see the data. Yeah. It's like you're in the forest and you can't see the trees, right? Or vice versa, however that goes. But is there a structure that enables them to respond? And I've certainly had experience with some organizations that have created a structure that allows the frontline leadership to initiate and drive change, where regional and corporate leadership simply helps to remove barriers to allow that change to occur. And we've seen significant results from organizations. So it's basically a way to address culture through structure, through an internal structure, a structure driven on change. And then suddenly those frontline leaders, they're begging for the data because they now have questions that they know they can answer, that they will not only be allowed to answer, so they're being recognized, allowed to personalize their work, they're being recognized in a standard organization that maybe something slightly different needs to happen at their location based upon their set of employees, their set of customers, their set of machinery, whatever the inputs are. And then they are allowed to make impact on it. When we see structures set like that, we see organizations make significant advancements. Oh, by the way, in employee engagement, but also in bottom line.
Any comments on? Thank you so much, Tim, for that insights. Thoughts, Gustavo?
No, I mean, I definitely agree. And I would say this company, Schneider Electric, has a beautiful purpose. You know, our mission is to provide energy as a basic human right. And I think when you have an organization that from the top, they are driving initiatives based on purpose, you see a much higher performance, similar to what you will see in a Silicon Valley best-in-class organization. So first of all, I think that's very important. And to your point about change, I think the other component is how do we make sure we align and make it clear for people what are we solving for? Because I think in our case, right, if we state the case, and I've been talking to many different areas, diversity, inclusion, talent, finance, safety, and so on, and everybody basically is getting clarity, right, on why we're doing this, why it's important, why we need to invest. I think you can see this change and the wheels moving much, much faster. But like I said, it depends to your point on the organizational structure, and some organizations are more mature than others. But the point is that all of us need to get into this journey. There is no room for continuous improvement anymore because pandemics and disruption come as a step change, right? So if you keep trying to do continuous improvement, you will not be able to catch up.
So what you've just validated, Gustavo, is that we're all in the behavior change business now.
Yeah.
And this is why I believe data and analytics plays an entirely different role now, because it's helping us not only see what we're solving for, understand why we need to solve for it, but also why the individual must behave in ways to execute that solve and or be part of the resolution of problems, because we have to start being more agile and experimental and empathetic. And so it's requiring certain behaviors that the age of standardization, quite candidly, never really allowed. So I think this really takes us to Jim Sterling, who's been kind enough to open his mic. Jim, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Very good. Jim, tell us a little bit about when you said, don't let perfection get in the way of great, because I think people keep falling into the perfection trap.
Yeah. And also I would say that, those types of individuals will allow the exception to drive the rule, right? So they'll maybe have a 10,000 store chain and they'll think about the one store that application or the new analytics wouldn't apply to. And then they put everything on freeze. Well, you got 9,999 stores that would have benefited, from that rollout. So, one of the other things is making sure you reach that level where you feel as though you have enough information to make the decision. And that's one of the things that defines leaders as well. Some people almost feel as though they have to have the actuals. Well, anybody can make decisions if they have actuals. So it's about determining at what level that you have enough info to make the right choice. In one of the examples, it's very rudimentary, but it applied when COVID-19 happened and people started to work from home. There was a situation where we have, many people who like to have two monitors. And, they were talking about how their work performance was going to decline if they went home without the incremental monitors. And the conversation was, well, don't we have to ask? And it was like, why do we have to ask? We are the right level to make that decision. We're the right level of leadership. Have them take the monitor home. Let's fill out a simple piece of paper. And then, the functionality of the individuals and their performance will remain high. Well, sure enough, IS came out with the method, 2 or 3 business days later, about simply notifying them, filling out a form that they could then track when people, brought those monitors home. So it's just simple things like that. Empower yourself, empower your team, and, the productivity will be maximized. So that's just my thoughts on that.
I greatly appreciate that, Jim. And
just so you know,
go ahead, Gustavo.
No, sorry, I was going to say, you don't hear it, but there is a lot of analysts applauding on the background to what you're saying, because I was going to tell you, a lot of people are very passionate in this topic. And yep. I know it does impact a lot of productivity in people, at least in my team. I see it in many teams. So great comments, Jim.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Any more comments before we wrap it up? Mark Wolka, I've seen you very active on the call today. Any? Would you like to ask Gustavo one final question before we wrap it up? Okay. Well, look, this is Gustavo. We can't thank you enough. Can you provide just a sense of where are we 12 months from now with data and analytics? Where are we? What's the vision? I mean, I know you call it business continuity analytics, and clearly we're at that stage right now, but where do you see us 12 months from now?
I mean, hopefully the vision is super simple, right? Let's have all the data in one place. Let's have teams driving a governance in which people is at the center of decisions, either workforce or customers. And then let's have the right tools. And again, this is what I think AI plays a huge role. So the tools and the algorithms and the robots do what they are good at. And us, the humans, we can spend our time with added value activities and working on things that really we are meant to be doing. I hope that encapsulates what we have discussed today. And if you allow me, Glenn, I would like to really thank my team and all the teams that support me, because I'm telling you, I had a lot of teammates who came back to me and said, hey, Gustavo, I was very tired, because we have a short-term amount of schedule, perhaps because in some countries you can work only 3 days a week or less hours, or you need to take some leave based on guidelines. There are a lot of changes that happened through this pandemic. And when we start talking about business continuity and the purpose of helping the organization to keep our employees safe, people just step up. They forget about if they are tired. They just step up and they just started working very hard and working and connecting and collaborating better, because everybody understands that we are in it together, from IT, safety, real estate facilities, finance, privacy, and so on. And especially special thanks to my team. Really, thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you're doing.
You're a first-class guy, Gustavo. And basically, you just said what Jim Sterling said. Give them the extra monitor and watch how more motivated they'll be to not only just doing their job, but feeling that sense of purpose to serve the mission. I have one final question for you, Gustavo. What's going to take us into the future? Technology or people?
I think people is the one who make the choices. People are the one who has the vision. Technology is going to enable to reach that vision. And I'm a people analytics person, but first, every time I make decisions, and I say this all along when I've been, you know me for like 7 years, right? Every time I make decisions, I understand that the first thing I need to think about is how this is going to impact our people. Is it going to be better for our workforce? Is it going to be better for our customers? Is it going to be better for society? Can we help somehow in times of need, like what is happening today? And I think we have a huge responsibility in the space of analytics, because we are the ones who give the data. But Glenn, this is the very important point. It's not just to look at the data, it's to make the right connections to evolve. We don't want to revolve. And you always talk about the revolving door, right? So that's why in this age of personalization, in this age of disruption, it is even more important to make the right connection so we evolve faster, because we don't have the same time that we used to have in 2010, 2005, 1995. It's a completely different era. We're moving too fast for that.
Well, and this is why the luxury of time is over. And what's sad is that back in 2015 or even 2005, the luxury of time was over. The difference is that there was a lot of cash, and yet we had the opportunity at that point to make moves to help us practice more evolutionary thinking. But what we ended up doing was practicing more substitutional thinking that slowed progress down. And so here we are. And time is we've really run out of time. But again, Gustavo, thank you very much. You know how much you mean to me, and just the respect I have in you. And I'm just extraordinarily proud of just your thought leadership and what you bring to the discussion. And just so all of you know, Gustavo Canton is going to be joining us at our 3-day summit that will be co-hosted by Fairfield University on October 28th, 29th, and 30th. It'll be a virtual summit. Given that all of you joined us today, we'll make sure that you're informed of it. And we're going to be talking about, how do you manage corporate strategy in this environment of the unknowns? And you can see that Gustavo is going to add a lot to that conversation. So for our next Leadership in the Age of Personalization live stream, it'll be on July 15th, where Megan Fritz, Vice President at General Mills, will talk to us about battling the gulf between assimilation and authenticity as you navigate the corporate environment. Until then, when you lead in the age of personalization, you will see things that others don't, do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gustavo.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye, all.
Bye-bye now.